Hello and welcome to another IGTV episode. I am Leah Courtney, a homeschool mom and blogger at aswewalkalongtheroad.com. And this is an episode in my series, Homeschooling the First Year and Beyond. If you are a new or relatively new homeschooler, or even if you're thinking about homeschooling, I encourage you to go through each episode in this series. You can find them on my profile page by scrolling down, or if you're in IGTV, you can find them on my profile just scrolling down to each episode. So today's episode is going to be about a typical homeschool day. Now, typical, I would put in air quotes. I know you can't see them that well because they're kind of off the screen, but here, air quotes, typical, because the fact is that there's no such thing as a typical homeschool day because so many people do things differently, and that's the beauty of homeschooling. But I know if you're new to homeschooling and you're feeling insecure, you might be thinking, well, I need some kind of a guideline. What are we supposed to be doing all day? So that's what I'm going to give you. What I want to do is I want to share with you an example of a day in our lives during different stages of homeschooling. And then I'll kind of touch on some days of the lives of other homeschoolers that I know to kind of give you a glimpse of the fact that this really can be different for everybody. So when my kids were younger, we liked to do a together time at the beginning of the day. So we would start our homeschool day with everybody all together. And what I mean by that, I have 4 children and they range in age with a 6-year gap from the oldest to the youngest. So as children were added to our family and as kids were getting old enough to start doing some school stuff, what I did was we would have 2 distinct parts of our homeschooling day. We would have the together part, and then we would have the individual part. So we would do our together time together. Now I've often heard people talk about a morning basket where they have all their kids together in the morning and they start homeschooling with this together time with everything in their morning basket. I love that idea. We did the same thing, didn't call it a morning basket, but it was the same principle. So we had our together time first. And in together time, we would do Bible, and then we would pray, and we would start our day with subjects that I did with all of the kids together. I liked to choose curricula that I could use with multiple kids as much as possible. So like history, that was one that I could read a history lesson, and then the kids were doing different things based on their age and ability level. And science was another one. Up until my older kids were in middle school, high school, science was one that I could read the lesson, and then the kids could do different things based on their age. So we would do this together time first, and that usually took us up close to lunchtime. Then after lunchtime, the kids were doing their individual work, things like math or literature and literature unit studies. They would do separate because of different age and ability and also because of different interests. So I would kind of rotate around as much as they needed me. The younger kids, for a long time they weren't really doing individual work, so I would maybe do things with the younger kids. I would do chores, cleaning up the house after lunch. And then we all had a quiet time, and I maintained a quiet time forever, y'all. I'm not joking. I still have a quiet time from 2 to 4 every day, even though, of course, my kids are all old now. My youngest is 14, so the 2 high schoolers are sometimes working on their schoolwork during that time, but a lot of times kids are just spread out all different places. My oldest 2 are in college, so they probably aren't even home. One of my high schoolers works, so she's not even home until 2 o'clock or a little after. So now I still, though, call it a quiet time. And when the kids were younger, up until the time that they were doing high school work and needed to work during that time, or they actually had jobs outside the house and were gone. They had a quiet time. 2 to 4 was our quiet time / rest time. When my younger kids were really little and needed naps, I could work with the older kids for a little bit during that time, and then we could have our rest. But that was a critical time to maintain because it gave me a rest, it gave them a rest, and it gave us the opportunity to do quiet, settled things like read, listen to audiobooks, play with Legos, that kind of thing. So that's what school looked like when my kids were younger. As the kids got older, things changed. When my kids each hit about 9th grade, they were pretty much totally on their own. I, at this point, just take on the role of sort of a mentor, checking up on you, making sure that you have everything that you need to learn, because they're either working independently or doing online classes, that kind of thing, but they're doing it pretty much on their own. So right now, our homeschool day typically looks like my 2 high school aged girls starting in their room in the morning, working at their desks. I have one who works a job at Chick-fil-A, and so she works the lunch hour 1 or 2 days a week. So she'll be stopping, leaving to go to her job, and then coming home and picking back up on schoolwork. My 2 older kids, of course, are now in college, so they're gone on and off throughout the day. And that's what our typical day looks like now. Now, I've always been unstructured, fairly unstructured. So this is sort of a laid-back homeschooling approach, and this is what it looks like for us. I do know other people who have a much more structured homeschool with a traditional homeschool curriculum, and their homeschooling looks a lot different because in their homeschool, kids are going to be divided up pretty much from the start using a packaged curriculum that is grade leveled. And so friends of mine who do this, their kids divide up from the very first part of the day right after breakfast, and they get started and they're doing their work independently, and the mom is maybe just going around and checking each person's individual work. So it looks a lot different from the way that my homeschool worked. And these people, because they're more structured and they're using a more structured curriculum, they might actually be working till 2 or 3 o'clock instead of a lot of it being done by lunchtime. But the key thing to remember is there is no typical homeschool day because everybody's homeschool is different. Everybody is going to use a different style based on their personality and the personalities of their kids. And just because you run into a mom at co-op who does it this way, don't be worried that you're doing it wrong because you're not doing it that way. Homeschooling is about being flexible and doing what works in your family. So another just little short illustration of this, I had a friend who was thinking of homeschooling at one point and asked if he could come and watch our homeschool one morning. And I agreed, but I tried to give the caveat that, all homeschools are different because I knew this friend was more structured and was not really going to go for the way that we were laid back with our approach to learning. So sure enough, he comes, we're doing our together time in the morning, and I have kids doing all kinds of stuff. My son's on the floor under the table half the time because that's where he was half the time. Kids are crawling in and out of chairs, they're coloring or doing puzzles or blocks while I read. He was driven crazy. And he's like, I could never do this. And I said, but you don't have to do this because this is us. This is the way that we function. It doesn't have to be the way that you function. You can structure your homeschool day however it works for you. So that's really the point that I want you to see in this episode is that homeschooling can be different based on whatever your personality is and the personality of your family. So have fun and enjoy your own very unique, typical homeschool day.